Okay, so recording is done, and let's get started. So I'm gonna share my screen. So hope like you guys can see my screen. Okay.
For niches where maybe it's not quite so crowded.
Okay, so let's get going. Okay, so thank you so much for joining our online seminar. We just released Exploratory 5.0 very recently. So like we wanted to provide you, sort of like introduction to it. I've written a blog post by announcing all those new features, but I think sometimes it's better to have more like kind of interactive sessions so that you can see like how it works. So, and also not just today, we're gonna start doing this like online seminar sort of like weekly. Next week happened to be the Thanksgiving week in US. So we probably are not gonna do that, but we're gonna resume the week after. And then, so each topic, we're going to talk about introducing the features, and then sometimes something to do is more like machine learning, sometimes something to do with data wrangling, different topics. And if you guys have anything interested in, and then let us know as well. Okay, so who the hell is speaking right now? Well, my name is Kan Nishida, CEO, co-founder of Exploratory. We started Exploratory 2.5 years ago, 2016 spring. Prior to that, I was working at a company called Oracle, and it was leading a development team building data science products ranging from machine learning to big data to data visualization and business intelligence and so on. And then we discovered that the world, the innovation is really happening in data is really happening outside those enterprise companies. It's more like happening in the open source community. So we always wanted to build the best of the best product. And then we realized that it was getting harder to build the best product within the enterprise companies. And also the development of that, innovation and the progress of this technology and algorithm in the data science is getting super ahead of most of the people in the world. So we wanted to close the gap so that everybody in the world will be able to use latest and modern data science methodologies to understand their own data, regardless if they can program or not, right? So that's sort of we thought, and then we started Exploratory in 2016. So our vision is always that we want to democratize the data science so that everybody can use it to understand their data, and then they can make better decisions based on their findings, right? And then the thing that we also said is the third wave. So we want to bring this a third wave. What is the third wave? Is that from left to right is a first, second, third wave. And then that's what's happening is really, I think the second wave is around 2000, because of this internet, the digitalization, we got a lot of data that private or enterprise company can't keep up in terms of how to solve those type of new challenges. So the open source community came up with a bunch of different, new technology, new methods, and then so on. And then the problem is that era, last 20 years, or especially the last 10 years, the people who could benefit from that type of innovations or the second wave will happen to be the data scientists who are supposed to be able to program. And so we want to change that so that we are trying to make is this third wave. Sort of we want to make easy for people to access those type of open source or the latest algorithms and technology in data. And that's what we are doing here. So what are we, so one of the things we do is we build Exploratory as a product, right? And as a tool that you can install on your desktop. So the data science workflow is at the very, very high level, typically like this. So you start with the questions, and then you access the data to answer those questions. Then you work on the data wrangling, which means basically cleaning up the data, transforming the data, and so on. Then you want to use visualization to understand the data intuitively by using your eyes. Then sometimes your eyes or intuition doesn't go so too far, especially when you have a complicated data or some hidden patterns inside your data. Then you want to use machine learning or statistical algorithms to find a better insights. And then this circle this process is not sequence, right? Like it's always, it kind of going back and forth, and then there's no like a right order or wrong order or anything like that. Sometimes you use machine learning algorithm to like find a pattern. So you might want to visualize it. So you go to the data visualization step, and then you realize some data was missing. So you might go to the data wrangling to transform that data, and then come back to visualization to make sure like what you have done. And then like you might go back to the machine learning or statistical model, and then you might realize you don't have enough data, so you go to data access and so on. So this is a reason like we have this circle at the center. And then finally, like you find some useful insights, then you have to communicate to other team members or like people who make decisions based on that finding. So this is a very typical, very high level, kind of like a technical way of like workflow. And then like we want to make sure that like you can actually do this type of task in a cohesive and a seamless way. So it's not like you have to, when you, to do data wrangling, you have to go there. To do the visualization, you have to use a different tool. I think that's basically breaks your train of thoughts. So we want to make sure that this process, especially at the center, this circle area, is going to be the smooth as possible. And that's what the exploratory is. And I think that's enough for the exploratory. I think the whole main topic of today is really to introduce the 5.0. So if you are new to exploratory, we have a bunch of tutorials and then other materials as well. So if you have any questions, just let me know after the training. After the seminar. But if you're existing users of the exploratory, then we have made a lot of changes in the 5.0. So some of the stuff you might get confused or you might be shocked. But once you get used to it, we believe this is going to be a much better experience in terms of like you do the data science. Okay, so there are a couple of different areas. One of the area, and this is the sort of the biggest change in the 5.0, is a data wrangling experience redesign. Excuse me. So what that is these are the kind of like a bullet list, and then nothing, reading on the bullet points is the most boring thing. So like I'm not going to spend much time here, but these are the items that like I'm going to actually show you like how those are, and then with the slides first, and then I'll give you the demo right after that. Okay. So just a second, maybe. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, cool. So this is the new UI. Like the first thing you see is that like if you are the existing exploratory users, like you get shocked because we don't have those like a command input area at the top. That's where like you used to have, you used to use to open the UI dialog or to manage existing steps and so on. We don't have that anymore. And then instead, like what you have at the top is like a summary, table, biz, chart, analytics tabs. Those are 4 tabs. And underneath is pretty much the same. You have this like a summary case, you have the same type of the charts, you have the table view and so on. But notice that the right-hand side, that's where we used to have like you used to see like our command of each step, and that's been redesigned. So now like every single step or the operation or the task became the token. And then you can actually click on that token to directly open the associated or corresponding dialogue. So in this case, I click on the mutate step, and then like there's a token, and I click on it, then you get this like mutate bracket create calculation dialogue. Okay, and then column highlight is there as well. Like we used to have this one in our command, but I think this is much easier to see now. So like you can click on the column on the table view or the summary view, then you see the associated token that has anything to do with this particular column. Okay. And then also there's, we have kind of like try to do a lot of this like instant pop-up. So you can get this like pop-up right away. So one of the areas very cool is that like, you can actually move the mouse on top of the token. and then see what's in there without opening that dialog. If you move mouse over on the token, then you can see that what's inside. But sometimes you might want to see the whole thing for that particular step. In this case, I'm placing the mouse over on the title of the step. Then you see mutate, bracket, blah blah blah. This is actually the content that you used to see in the older version of the Exploratory at the right-hand side. Okay. And then there's another cool feature is that now you can split a step. So sometimes a step involves many tokens, especially for mutate, right? You do a lot of different calculation operations. And sometimes you want to debug, hey, which token is causing a problem, which token or operation is doing what type of the work you might want to see in the summary view of the result. Then in that case, you can actually split it. There's a menu you can access from the right-hand side top, and then click on it, and then the step will be split, and each step will have its own token. But sometimes you want to do opposite, right? You might want to combine multiple steps into a single step. In that case, you can select multiple steps by using Shift key. And then you're going to see this menu called Combine Multiple Steps. And click on that. Then you will get that step combined together. Another cool thing is that this is not really a new feature because we had that before, but we made it easier to notice, actually, this cool feature. So we brought this disable step. You could always disable the step, but we brought this menu at the top as an icon. Therefore, you can just click on it to disable the step. Once you disable, that step will become kind of blurred or grayed out. And then you can see the enable icon in this case. Then you can click on it to bring that step back. And this would be very useful when you want to kind of, experimental mode, you might want to try different filter, you might want to try different type of calculation, maybe other operations. And then if you want to turn it on or off to see how the result will be different, you might want to use that. And then later, you want to just keep it sort of disable, and then you use that as kind of a production environment and so on. So it's very useful, but what it really is we made it easier to realize. So. Okay, and then this is one of the most requested feature that from the existing users that people. Especially when you have a bunch of columns, so you want to search, where is that, column that I was looking for, then you can actually search the column in the summary view as well. We're going to add, this is only summary view for now, but we are working on to add that for the table view as well in the future releases. Okay, and then another area is that we're going to continue improving the data wrangling experience, and then the way to improve the wrangling experience to introduce more UI-based solutions, right? So selecting columns is one of the areas. It used to be it's not really productive, you got to select one by one, and so that was kind of hard to maintain. Now we introduce this select columns dialog, and then it's much easier to select or deselect the columns. And the same thing, kind of close to that was to reorder the columns. So sometimes you want to have certain set of the columns at the left-hand side, and a certain set of the columns at the right-hand side, and so on. So you want to kind of shuffle which columns to show up first and later. Now you can actually do that by doing the drag and drop in the reorder columns. So that's another area. And again, we're going to keep introducing new UI for doing certain type of the data wrangling task. So stay tuned for that. And in the chart, we didn't introduce new chart types this time, though we are working on some of the existing exciting new chart types for the next release or future releases. But one main thing is that chart pinning. Chart pinning, again, was there, but we sort of redesigned the experience around how to use the chart pinning feature. And then another area is a tab scroll, so like you can create as many charts, and then like usually like you end up like having a, you know, like let's say like 7 or 8 charts, and then you start having like some of the charts under the more menu in the older release, but now it's all keep going to the right hand side. So it's more like kind of Excel sheet or Google sheet, And then like you can, you know, like reshuffle, like changing the orders, and also see the thumbnail for each chart tab as well. Okay, so that's the chart pin button, the new pin button. Then, so I think that's pretty much the kind of new UI UX around the data wrangling, and then a little bit of the chart. And then there's another section is the analytics and also the dashboard notes slides. But before going there, like I want to actually jump in to like show you more like kind of interactive way to introduce such features. Okay, so to do, I am going to use this FIFA data. This is actually soccer or football, depends where you are, data. So what you can see here is, for example, each row is actually each soccer player. And then so there's a name, and then there's a wage, how much they're making, and then the age, nationality, and also there's a bunch of scores for each ability. So, for example, this person, this player is like, you know, it's 0 to 100. So like 89 is a score for acceleration. Aggression is a 53, agility 89, and so on. And there are a bunch of scores. Okay. And then there are another section for the score is that like, these are based on the position. So like based on center back, and this position, this player scored like 53, and so on. Okay. And then there is a preferred position. So this player prefer this position, or is good at these type of positions or something. So there are a couple of values in here, sort of divided by space. So that type of the data, right? So just to show, give you more ideas. So like, for example, one is a nationality here. And then you can click on this chart icon. And then like you see, so what type of the, you know, which country has more players in this data. So I'm going to just sort it here. And then you see here is, for example, that there are 1,630 players from England, and there are 1,140 players from Germany, and so on. I'm going to just click. These are not new features, but I just wanted to give you some idea. So here's a map. I'm going to select that like a world map. And then here, the key property, the data has a name instead of the code. So I'm going to keep that as a name. And I'm going to change that to name as a key columns. Oops, not the name. This is the player name. Actually, nationality is the data that has the matching value. So here, like I can see, for example, like pretty much Brazil, and then some of the Europe, and these are the these countries have a lot of players in this data set. And then maybe some other country like Japan here, and then US here, and so on. Okay, so that's the data. So like, I want to kind of do a couple of wrangling stuff. So first, though, is this summary, and then you just one second. I'm gonna. Here we go. First, so this one has a position data, right? So sometimes like you're looking for the column, hey, where's the soccer in preferred position like you know we are talking about, and then this is a search, and you can actually click on it, and then type the you know like whatever the matching the characters of the column name. Then you can see, okay, so here's the positioning. So for example, preferred position. So like, okay, there's that. There are 802 unique values for this particular column, and so on. Okay, and then what I want to do here though is I want to understand like where this, for example, wage 2, or sorry, like wage 1. So this is like how much they're getting paid, and then like how this column is being created. So I can actually go here and then see, you know, how that column has been created. So like, for example, here, when I go to this column, it's like, it's called separate two columns. So looks like there is a column separation happen. So it used to be like wage is kind of the same column, but probably this turned out to be has a K and also M, like for medium. So we separated it and then like do some kind of calculation like by using K-swim based on like if it's K and then divide multiply 1,000, if it's million multiply million and so on, right? So that's the data we have. And then what we want to do here is a couple of things. First, so so this is where is the positioning. Let's select the column first because there are just too many columns. There's 73 columns, and most of the stuff we are not going to be able to use. For example, this position-based score, we don't really care at this point. We want to see like how this like ability-based score. We want to focus on that. So let's select the columns here, right? So like, for example, name to, let's say like a nationality or something. Like we want to select these kind of plus some of the other columns, right? And you can actually select from here, column header menu, or you can select from, click on this plus button. Either way, and this plus button is what you used to see on the left-hand side around here before. But now anything to do with adding the step is underneath here. These menus pretty much the same, so there's not much surprise there, except we move this custom command at the top. Okay, but here in this case, I'm gonna just keep only these columns. So like select the selected columns, and then like we got this. And then from here, well, like I realized that like I wanna select more columns. Then what I can do is that to click on this like a token. I'm gonna select a step and I click on it. And then like you see like what columns are selected. Right-hand side, the preview. And then from here, like, you know what, like I want to select, like, for example, the club name and also these score for the abilities, starting from acceleration to volleys. And then so I'm using a shift key. And also like I want to include, for example, preferred position. If you can't find, if you're having a hard time, you always can use the type in the filter. So for example, I can do something like this and select it and then click on the X button and then to select that as well. There's just some weird bug that we found recently, should be fixed soon, is that like sometimes this column, like there's a random column shows up at the first, but in the case you can just deselect it and then you can fix that as well. So now this point looks good. I want to select only these, select these columns and click run button. And then like select step is done. And then now like we have only 43 columns, right? And then like what I want to do from here is to focus on this, this preferred position. Let's bring this column to the beginning because I don't want to keep like scrolling here. So like move columns to first, for example. And then now like we have the preferred position at the beginning. Also, like I can actually click on the token again to change the position as well. Column position as well, or column order. So in this case, I want to change preferred position to be maybe like after age, or like I want to bring nationality right after name, and so on. I can so kind of move around different columns and so on here. And that's okay. So I just click on run button. And then sort of we have the select step, reorder steps, and so on. And then from here, like I want to do like a quick data wrangling stuff. So this preferred position, this kind of like a typical problem, like sometimes like one column has multiple values. And then like you here, what you want to do is like you want to actually separate these. And different way of separating. For example, like, separate into the columns or separate into the rows. But this time, what I want to do is I want to actually take just first value because there seems to be like a kind of similar type of data if you're familiar with the soccer. So I'm going to try to take just first value here. To do, click on the column header menu, and then like work with text. And then there are a bunch of like text wrangling operations underneath of this menu. So I'm going to use this extract nth word. And then this is going to produce like this word function. And this is super cool because based on this index, this is like a 1, that means it's going to take the first value. And then you can set like how the data is being separated. In this case, a space. It can be comma, it can be colon, and so on. So, but in this case, it's space. I'm going to just type one space. And then like here, this is like a mutate create calculation dialog. This is also redesign. So hope this is slightly better than, much better than before. But anyway, so I'm going to override this existing column this time instead of like creating a new column. Then just click on run button. Oh wait, so here is a keyboard shortcut. So like this shortcut was there before, but not many people knew. So like we actually made it explicit. So here the run command is the command enter. So instead of clicking the run button, I can actually use a shortcut key and command enter to run. And then this column has only first value, right? Then like there's a new create calculation. And again, like I can click on this token to open this dialog. So so that this is very like a kind of new experience compared to the previous release. Another thing I want to do is this is actually kind of too detailed. I want to actually separate into only like a defense and a midfielder and then the forward position. So only like 4 categories. And then, sorry, three categories? Yeah. Then to do, I want to actually use a case when. So based on these values, and then like I want to map to some more like kind of bigger category. And then to do, I'm going to do some cheating to here. So I have written this like a case when condition stuff. So instead of writing from scratch for this demo, I'm going to just copy and paste. But what this one is doing, the case when, if this value is in, it can be equal, but in this case, I know that there might be multiple candidates. So I'm using %in. This means like if this value matches GK, and then this tilde is basically what do you want to do if that is true. So in this case, GK. If this value is one of these values, then it's going to be defense. And then if the value is one of these, and then midfielder and forward and so on. So this is a case when. This is pretty convenient function. But I'm going to create a position. This time, instead of like overriding preferred position, I'm going to create a new column, right? And then click run button. Okay. And then the new column has been created here, the positions. Okay. So now we have that in here, right-hand side, and this is a create calculation step. And then like we have like a reorder and a select and so on. What we could do though here is that like, hey, you know what? Like there's a create calculation and there's a create calculation here. I want to actually bring these things together. There's not much point, might not be the point of it, but you know, if you're such a like organized person, like you might want to combine them together. So let's do in such case, like you can actually drag and drop these steps. So grab the kind of a title area and then move that to wherever you want to select, drop. So in this case, I'm going to move it right before the select, right after the create calculation. Okay. Now, so like I have like a create calculation, and if they're the same nature of the command, in this case, the mutate or the create calculation, then I can combine them together by selecting multiple columns. So here, I'm going to use I use a command key and then select multiple columns, right? And then you see that here is like a combine multiple steps. If I click on this icon, this is going to combine those 2 steps together. Now, like you see the 4 tokens used to be in the 2 separate steps. Okay. And if though, like if you're working on this, and then sometimes like it happens is like one of the operation is causing some problem. And then like you don't know like what, you know, what's really happening before and after kind of stuff, then you can always split this step. Let's do that. So like click on this like a 3 bar, like a step menu, and there's a split step. And if you click on this, and this is this has just split the step to the 4 steps. So like each step has now its token. And this is useful. Like we're finding this is very useful, especially when you're sort of like a debugging, like, you know, your data wrangling process. Okay. I'm going to actually combine these things together. Like it's no point of like separating this at this point. So now like we have 1 single step with 4 tokens. Okay. And then here, so one thing though, like if I move this step, sometimes what happens if I go to the select step, this selected step is explicit, which means if I click on this dialog, and then that new, you remember like this position column that I created it by using the case when, that column was not selected in this step, but I can actually click on it to bring it back. And then we get this result. Again, we have the player's name and where they're coming from, and then wage, and also all the ability score. Then the last column is the position. Okay. So from here, like I want to do like sort of like a kind of aggregation or summarization operation. So I want to see like by the country, not by the player level, by the country. You know, like I want to see like what are the average of these scores, right? So I want to compare, let's say, like Japan, US, and Brazil, like how those average values are differ. One problem here, though, is that like eventually I want to do this like a summarize operation, like mean or using the mean function to calculate the average. But the problem is here, for some reason, these columns are presented as character. And I think that when we import it at the very beginning, there were like NA or there are some kind of character values at a certain point or something. So this happens sometimes. And then, well, I can change the column data type one by one, but that's too much of the trouble. So let's do all of them together. So select all these columns together. For example, these are the columns that like, I want to actually convert to numeric, right? And then notice that like, there's one column is already numeric. It's in this case integer precisely. So I want to deselect this, and so by using the command key. And then, so now all the character columns are selected, for the ability columns are selected, and I want to convert this to numeric. So click on the column menu of any of the columns, and then change data type, and then convert to numeric. And then this open this dialog called create, calculate, mutate to. This is actually for multiple columns. And then like here is like operations. There are a bunch of different types of operation. I'm not going to go into much detail, but it says convert to new number. So if I run, and then all the columns now like happily being numeric data type. Now like I can do more like a numerical operations, right? So let's do that. To do here the nationality column, so like I'm gonna group by because I want to calculate the average for each country. But I realize though here is like there's certain countries has only, for example, in this case, Afghanistan has only 3 players. And so it's not much, it's kind of like scary to calculate the average for like only 1 or 2 or 3 people. And let's take a look at like what's going on here is going to the chart, the same chart that we saw before. And notice here is like this height of the bar represent the number of the rows, meaning the number of the players here, right? So, but here there's a kind of like a big bump right here. But it looks like many countries, sort of like the kind of countries come to the World Cup have almost like greater than 200 players in this data set. And then some of the countries, except Nigeria or maybe some of the African countries. But, you know, some of the countries around here only, like 58 players and so on. So basically what I want to do here is like, I want to just limit or filter out like the countries with few players, right? So to do, there's a couple of ways to do it. One very, very easy way to do is to use filter, but it's more like aggregation filter. What that means is go to the filter, and then instead of selecting this type of the sort of like a preceding operations, there's a custom option. And this has nothing to do with the new features of the Exploratory 5.0, but this is just a technique that's so cool that like I just wanted to introduce. I just wanted to sneak into this session. But if you can actually use aggregation function, for example, mean or sum or whatever the stuff, right? Because right now it's data frames grouped. That's why each group has a different color. And I want to use like any function. Any function, you don't have to give any argument here. It just counts the number of the records for each group. In this case, Afghanistan 3, Albania, I don't know, maybe like 35 or something, right? So it calculates the number of the records for each group. And if that number is greater than, for example, 200, and then like I want to actually keep those those groups basically, or those records. So what that means, if I run this one, And then now, like, the Afghanistan obviously disappear. And I said 200, so therefore Albania also disappear. If I go to the chart, here, it's also, like now, like all the countries we are looking at here is the countries with greater than 200 players. Okay. Now here though is like one thing. Here the pin button, and then right now the default is actually pin. So when you create the chart as a default, and then like whatever, like even like doing anything before, like it's already kind of pinned like this. And then sometimes you want to actually move around different steps, especially like when you start adding different steps and so on. In that case, what you could do is that you can either click on this to unpin. Then like what happens is like every time like you move, and then the chart actually reflects the data that's coming from this step. For example, this step, that means the data is being transformed only up to this step. If you click on here, the data is being transformed all the way up here, right? Each of the right-hand side step is, think of it as like an Excel sheet. It is like an independent sheet or something, except they're not independent. It's kind of like a sequential transformation. But then if I recommend like you kind of like pin it so that like when next session, when you reopen the project, when you came back from different data frame or different that dashboard, your chart is always pointing to something that you expect, right? So in that case, I recommend you use drag and drop. So like a drag this pin icon and drop to some step that like you like to sort of like a pin. Then anytime like you reopen this chart, the chart is always stick with this particular step. So there's no accidentally like the column doesn't exist in particular cells, therefore like the chart gets broken kind of situation. So that's that chart pinning feature. Okay, and okay. So now let's go back to the table view, and then go to this filter session, filter step, right? And then like so what we want to do now is the original requirement here is to calculate the average for each country, right? So like we have like 28 countries now. I want to make it like to this data right now, like 14,000 rows to just 28 rows, each row representing each country with all those summarized values or like an average of this ability data, right? So to do, like for example, like one way to do is you go here, select the column header menu and select the mean, and then run button. And then like you are going to create, repeat this maybe like I don't know how many times, like 30 times, and which nobody wants to do, right? It's just such a pain. So in that case, I'm gonna just delete this step. Instead of doing that, let's go invoke this like a custom command mode. And there is a super cool function called summarize if. And this one, like you can give it a predicate, which is the first argument. What that is basically the conditions of like setting, evaluating the data type mainly. So to do here, and then like you can say, well, I want to focus on the is numeric. That means evaluate all the columns of this data, and if the column is numeric data type, and then it will do the summarize operation. What summarize operation you want to do? Well, I want to do just mean. There's no bracket or anything like that, just type mean. Well, I'm familiar with mean, and when I do the mean, like I want to make sure like it doesn't get influenced by the NA. Like I want that to ignore the NA. So in that case, I usually give the argument in the mean function. Okay, so if that's the case, you can actually give the argument, just type it like this. And then this is going to ignore the NA and then like calculate the mean with the rest of the values. Anyway, so I'm gonna just command enter. And then this will give me the average for all the columns. And then for each country. And then like once we got the, I have this data, then like I can start, doing, for example, clustering or maybe visualization or whatever to find, similar patterns among the countries and so on. Here, I'm gonna just do a quick visualization, go to the chart, and then let's create a new chart. And then maybe like, let's say like using a box plot. by the nationality. And then let's see, like, for example, the acceleration. The acceleration, for example, here, this probably, like, I don't even have to use a box plot. The reason I wanted to use a box plot is I wanted to see how those scores varied, because we know there are about like 20 different abilities, right? I want to see like each country, like, maybe score high to low, like with certain positions. And I want to see like what's the variance for those the metrics or the ability columns, right? And the problem is like these are all presented as different columns, right? So what I wanted to do is that, like, from here, acceleration to this volleys, all these ability metrics, right? I want to see the variance of these for each country. How can I do that? Well, if these columns are not presented as columns, instead presented as rows, as a category, then I could have done what that means. Well, let's gather these metrics. And this actually happens a lot, when you sometimes want to visualize, especially sometimes if you want to see like, hey, I want to have the Y1, Y2, Y3, Y4, Y5, and so on. In that case, you can actually gather these columns. So let's do that. Here, there is a gather and selected column, selected range, either way. And then just quickly run it without changing any parameters. What just happened is now like we have the key and value columns. Key columns actually has all those column name as a categorical values, right? Categories. And then like each associated values presented under the value columns. And therefore, we have 942 rows now. Instead, we used to be 28 rows, because now like the rows are repeated for each category of the ability, right? So what that means, when I go to the chart and make sure now the pin should be at the last step, because that's the data that we want to visualize from here. So move this pin icon to the very last step, is the gather step. And then like assign the y-axis, that value, right? And what we are seeing here is, for example, this Argentine, is like they scored like from 43 to 65. Italy, on the other hand, there's somebody scoring 17. This is like an average. So like some of the measures, they scored a 17. Two highest is a 64, and so on. And then because this step is pinned, so that means I can actually change any of the middle step here. Let's change that to here. It's like it says n is greater than 200. That means more than 200 players. Hey, like I want to see, I want to just loosen that condition. So for example, I want to see like more than 50 players or something like that. Click on run button. And then like I'm seeing like more countries, because now the countries with fewer than 200 but greater than 50 start showing up here. But the step is pinned at the very end, last step. So I don't have to worry about like reconfiguring the chart and so on. Okay. So that's pretty much the new experience around the data wrangling. But I want to go quickly to the next one, which is the analytics. So analytics, we added a couple new analytics here. Though some of the stuff, like for example, k-means clustering, the market basket analysis was there, but it was only from the command line mode. Command line meaning the step mode. So like you can add the new step to do the k-mean clustering to generate the data. And then it's up to you how you want to visualize the data to understand, what the clusters are, kind of stuff. But we created it, we introduced this k-means and the market basket analysis along with the decision tree under the analytics view. Therefore, you can not only run them quickly, but also you can get like a pre-seeded or pre-populated charts so that you can have a better understanding of those things. So let's quickly look at it. And there's a new one called decision tree, which is, if you're familiar with the data science or the machine learning side of things, and then nothing surprising. But it turned out this is actually one of the most requested feature by those who need to communicate what they're finding with the people who doesn't understand the statistics of machine learning. So decision tree is actually a great visualization to show them like how that condition or what's the pattern in the data works. And then the time series forecast with profit. This is not new, but we actually enhanced. So now it supports holiday data, and also it supports like a minimum threshold, not just a max threshold as well. So there's a few enhancements there. So I want to show like just like one k-mean clustering here at the very high end, and because I'm planning to do more like a detailed session later on. So here to do though, I'm going to use a different data. It's called California election. This is actually 2016, not the latest. 2016 California election ballot measure, which means people vote for like, you know, support, they want to support the new roles or not kind of stuff. And 2016 was very, very interesting year because there was one of the ballot measure was the adult freedom condom requirement, which is very, you know, only the California was a Hollywood. Another interesting stuff was the legalization of marijuana. So that was very, you know, kind of like made a huge headlines everywhere. And then also there are a couple of other things. So for example, we tried to make it harder for purchasing the firearms, for example. And then also we wanted to introduce ban on single-use plastic bag and carry out bag charges and so on. So it was a lot of like a kind of interesting ballot measures. But the question here is that like we have this data, so each row is representing each county of the California. There are 58 counties, and then there are you know 17 ballot measures, right? And then these values represent the supporting rate. For example, like when you see greater than 0.5, that means 50%. That means it supported it, right? So for example, sorry. Here, the marijuana legalization. So that is, for example, 0.66. That means this county called Alameda, that's where Berkeley and Oakland and Pixar, the company called Pixar, are there. But anyway, so that county, the people in that county supported this ballot measures with a 66% supporting rate. So with this, can we, I mean, based on how they supported each measure, can we cluster these counties? You know, some of the counties close to each other, or maybe far from each other, and so on. So you could do was that like you could actually select these columns and then select under the analytics and then run k-means before, but we made it super easier. So like go to the analytics view and then select k-means here. Again, this analytics view also, this pinning is a default. So like if you want to take the data before you, you know, pass the data to the machine learning or statistical algorithm, then you make sure that the analytics is pinned to the right step at the right-hand side. But anyway, so click on the variable columns. And this is the same column selection dialog that like I already demonstrated as part of the select step. But here you can select which ballot measure you want to based on the, before creating the clusters. So I'm going to select all these 17 ballot measures and then click OK. And then the subject column, you can actually run k-mean clustering without this, but in this case, what we are interested in is a county name. So like I'm going to just select it. But it doesn't actually really matter in terms of like a creating cluster. This is more to help us understand what each cluster means. But anyway, so click run button. And then like the first thing you would see is this is called a biplot chart. So like each gray line is basically representing each measure, and then each dot is representing each, in this case, each row, but in this case, each county. Each county is actually representing, each row is being represented by each county. So in this case, and also these sort of measures and county are presented in the two-dimensional space, and it says PC1 and PC2. What that means is that this is actually using something called like a principal component analysis, PCA algorithms, to try to present as much variance of the information of the original measures in 17 measures in this case, right? We have 17 measures we selected, but basically this algorithm try to present as much information by using just two dimensions. And in this case, for example, these measures right here, like a left-hand side, kind of pointing to the left-hand side, these tend to be represented by this x-axis direction. Okay, and then when you see these measures that kind of closer to one another, that means those measures are pretty highly correlated. What that means, correlation is actually here. I'm going to just show you quickly. I'm going to do the same thing. Oops. If I run the correlations, and here, for example, like a lot of stuff is a red color, that means a higher correlation. So for example, cigarette tax and firearm ammunition sales, the correlation is like 0.98. So it's mostly those two are similar. That means like basically we don't even have to have like those two things, right? Because if you know the answer for the one measure, like you're going to know like an answer for the another measure, right? So nonetheless, so if when you see like these two measures are pointing kind of similar, that means those are pretty close, right? And then therefore, I think these measures are similar. So this PC1, the primary component, PC1, is 72% of the information of the original measures are presented by using this kind of artificially created x-axis. Okay, so now it's basically like we have cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, and cluster 3 seems to be when you have these dots closer to these measures, that means they scored high values on those scores. And if you see the dots on the opposite side, that means they scored very low or on these measures because it's going the opposite side. And when you see here, though, like there are a couple of measures going down, like adult film measure or legislation procedure requirement measure. And that means these probably county scored higher on these compared to like a cluster 1 and cluster 3. So this view gives you the very high level, sort of like a quick understanding of like what it is at the very from high level. But if you want to understand even more detail, then you go to the box plot. And then here, basically the cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, and you see the variance of each measure. In this case, death penalty, for example, the cluster 3, they score low. And then like y-axis value is normalized value, so it's not like original, but the 0 is an average, and 1 is a standard deviation 1, and 2 is standard deviation 2. So how much far from the average. In this case, though, like for example, cluster 1, cluster 2, this is like a red color bar is super different. So the cluster 1 is actually supporting it. This penalty, I think this penalty processing time limits. So they want to set the time limits. So therefore, I think a cluster 3 is opposite. And then cluster 1 is sort of like a yes. So because they scored high. And then the other, most of the measures though in the cluster 3 are supporting it, right? So for example, I keep using this example, but that it's not like I'm trying to convince you guys anything, but this marijuana thing is, for example, the cluster 3 supported it at a high supporting rate as opposed to, for example, other clusters. Right. So these are the measures that like a cluster 3 tend to support, and these are the measures tend to oppose. And then like a cluster 1 and 3 are pretty much the kind of like going to the opposite direction. So that started giving you the idea of like, for example, okay, maybe the cluster 3 is more like a liberal counties and cluster 1 is more conservative counties. You can start labeling by using your human judgment or intuition. And then like you can see, for example, other stuff like error bars and line chart. I'm not going to go into the detail, but if you're interested in how to read these charts, and you can take a look at the 5.0 announcement blog post as well. Okay, and the last thing is pretty cool here that this is a stack bar, and then like each cluster has is divided by the color, in this case in the county, which is basically the subject. If I change the subject though, there's a party name column. This is a column that has two values, Republican, Democrat, based on which presidential candidates they supported as a majority. And if I run it, and then you can see, okay, so the cluster 1 is actually the Republican counties, and then cluster 3 is a Democratic county. So that now kind of all of a sudden makes sense why this cluster 3 is high value on these measures and low values on these measures. Okay, So I didn't have the chance to talk about like other analytics, but these are especially like market basket analysis is that like one of the topic, and also time series focus with profit. One of the these are the topics that like we are planning to present at the follow-up online seminar as well. Okay, so we also changed some of the steps around the dashboard and note and slides, but it's more like kind of how UI based. UI design change. But one big thing is that like now we support on opening the separate window, and in that we made it as a sort of like default behavior. So when you create a new dashboard or note, it will open as a separate window. So therefore, like you can go use the main window to modify the data or the chart and so on, and then you can continue work on note or dashboard in a separate window, and also you can export note or dashboard as an EDF. Then you can actually give that to another person who is using Exploratory, or you can bring that to different project in the same environment. And then that dashboard, for example, will include all the data that are associated, used by this dashboard. So you can reproduce exact the same way of building that note or dashboard that you actually done before. Okay. So here's the last topic is like a roadmap. So we just released 5.0, and currently we're working on the 5.1. And these are basically we want to release this, hoping like end of next week, to introduce some of the leftover features. We actually started working on some of the features before, but we couldn't make it because of quality issues. So those are the things that like we've been working on in the last 2 weeks. And we should be able to release, I'm hoping, by end of this month. And after that, like we are planning to release 5.2 in January and 5.3 in March. And then we're going to continue improving the data wrangling experience, and also chart and analytics area as well. And then main big thing is around the scheduling. So right now, like you can publish a dashboard, for example, and you can schedule at Exploratory.io, or you're the collaboration server. You might be using a collaboration server, and the same thing. It's basically the kind of on-premise version of the Exploratory.io. We are going to support scheduled deliver, so like not just scheduling, but also output that you might want to deliver to somewhere by email, Slack, or you might want to push the data to Google Sheet or something like that. So that type of the features that like we are working on for this 5.2. And 5.3, we want to make it even like conditional. So therefore, like schedule and then deliver only if matches a certain condition or something like that. Okay, then the future seminars is here. Oops, what happened? Oh, here. So next week, because of Thanksgiving, as I said, so we are planning to do 26th Monday around the same time. I'm going to make the announcement again as well. And then we're going to talk about the time series forecasting with profit then. And also, like we are planning for other topics as well. So if you have anything that you like to hear, please contact me at Exploratory.io. And then future online seminar informations are Exploratory.io/online-seminar page as well. And if you're interested in knowing more detail, like doing hands-on kind of stuff, like we do provide online training as well. And that's something that if you're interested in detail, please go check that out. Okay, I think that's all for today. And if you have any questions, I want to take like a few questions here. If you have, you can unmute and then speak up as well.
Ken, any other features changed around the notebooks aside from the separate window?
The notebook, the feature itself is not much change. Wait a second. Yeah, separate window. Oh, and then side-by-side mode is one area of the difference. So, for example, here, like if I create a new, oops, like let's say like a note or something like that, then you open the separate window, but then the default is now this like a side-by-side view mode. So this is the report. And then like, you can always click on this one to make it like a single view mode. So either way. Another thing is also we made this like a table of contents as a default. So when you start writing, let's say, this is like a title, and then this is a title 2, and something like that. And then like when you in a single view mode, you don't see it. But if you have like oops, what happened here? Okay, and then if I want to open, let's say like open the Windows. Oops. Maybe when you publish, sorry, I think when you publish, the table of contents should be displayed. There's something weird about that. I think even like a preview mode, it just should be DOC. But I think this becomes the default as well.
Cool.
Yes. So
Awesome
yes.
stuff.
Good. Yeah, let me know, like if you're using some of the features, and then if you like to see more, some like enhancements or, even like bug fixes and stuff. And then we are always here to, listen to your feedback as well.
I think the last feature I have you guys haven't done is export to PDF, but I can wait.
Export to PDF, yes. 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 So we are working on that. So like export PDF for Note, export PDF for Slide, and that's yes on our plate. So stay tuned for that. And also we are planning to support export to PDF for chart as well. So yes, we didn't forget.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been using export to SVG, and that's been working great.
Oh, okay.
So seriously, your tools changed my life. So thanks for everything you guys do.
Oh, good. Thanks for the kind words. That makes our day. Okay. With that, I think the time is up now, so I'm gonna close this session. But please, use the chat window inside Exploratory. Like these are question things. Like if you click on it, and then you can actually open the chat window, so you can send us the message. Or my email address @exploratory.io. We always love to hear your feedback. So anytime you have anything, please get in touch. Okay. With that, I'm ending this session. Thank you so much for joining our session, and then looking forward to seeing you again like at the next session.
Sounds good.